Today we're reviewing the two-volume set from the Foundations of Waldorf Education series by Steinerbooks, titled Faculty Meetings with Rudolf Steiner. And Volume 1 is subtitled 1919 to 1922. Volume 2 is subtitled 1922 to 1924. And so from the titles and dates you can gather that what is contained in these books are the faculty meetings from the first Waldorf school, those where Rudolf Steiner was present. So Steiner had set up the first Waldorf school, but he had lots and lots of things going on in his life at the time, lectures all over Europe, activities, political activities in Germany around social reform, lots of things to occupy his time, and his role as the school director of the first Waldorf school was something that he could not devote himself to full-time or anything even approaching full-time. Rather, having given the initial setup for the school, given the teachers the direction that they should take, and orientation to the curriculum and the theoretical work, he then had to leave and would come back periodically and visit with the school, look at how things were functioning, sit in on classes, have one-on-one conferences, professional development conferences with the teachers there, and he would also attend the faculty meetings that they would hold. And those where he was in attendance, those were then recorded by the participants who were listening. They would write down their notes of what happened. And what Steiner was doing here, you can kind of get an insight into Rudolf Steiner as manager. That is, you can see his practical responses to the different organizational and management and administrative challenges that the school was undertaking. And what is recorded here are his questions and answers to the reports and the concerns that the teachers brought him. And for example, the very first session recorded here, Thursday, September 25th, 1919, that's about 2 weeks after the school has been open. So 2 weeks in, and Steiner is back for a faculty meeting, and here he is troubleshooting all the different problems that are going on. Now, the interesting thing about these faculty meetings is because of Steiner's schedule, they were often held fairly late in the night, some of them running as late as midnight. So I've been at many Waldorf schools and attended many late evening meetings and so forth, but I've not yet been to one that's gone to midnight. But then again, I've not been at anywhere Steiner was around either. So, at least directly in person. So what you get here, faculty meetings with Rudolf Steiner, is, well, let's go a little bit into the textual source, because that's kind of important too. You could imagine, of course, that it was a one-to-one record, word for word and so forth. That's not actually the case. What happened was that a couple of the participants wrote down their notes, sometimes jotting notes as the meetings were in session, but often afterwards going home and then writing down what they remembered for their own personal use. And then later then reconstructing them a little bit more extensively. And so of all of the quote-unquote books with Rudolf Steiner's name on them, these here are perhaps textually the most suspect, by which I mean they doubtless capture the general gesture and mood and information of what Steiner wanted to convey, or what happened while he was present, but they don't actually contain word for word or even attempted word for word reconstructions of what Steiner was saying and doing in that moment. The stenographers that were following him around all the time at that point were not present for these sessions. It was just Steiner with the teachers, and they were writing down some of their recollections. And so because of this, because of the unreliability of the sources, for a long time they were unpublished, even in German. And but the interest level was so high. People were circulating copies of copies and things friends had given them 20 years earlier. And so the Rudolf Steiner Rudolf Steiner Nachlass, the estate, decided that it would be better to have an official best we can do copy rather than all of these unofficial who knows what all's in them copies out there. So the editors at the the editors of the German edition, it came out in 1975, they took all the existing notes they could get their hands on and tried to harmonize and reconstruct them and get the tone and the pacing approximately correct for how Steiner would have talked. And then out of that, they reconstructed this 2-volume set that runs to nearly 800 pages. So it is a wealth of practical information. It's also a really interesting insight into how Steiner worked as a manager, but it is not really word-for-word Steiner, which means, of course, that if there are sections in here that seem strange, you have to kind of treat that with a grain of salt. Just to give an example, there are various, sometimes contradictory statements of how teachers should deal with students who are left-handed, for example, or who show no lateral dominance in one direction or another. And if you were to just take a couple of sentences directly word for word out of here, well, that would be a bit suspect in how you would work with this stuff, because number one, the sources aren't that reliable, and then number two, it's often important to look at things comprehensively, and even within these 2 volumes, the statements about how to handle left-handed children contradict each other. So that should be a reason to pause before you just accept blindly any simple statement in here, whether it's how to handle the writing of left-handed children or how to teach Roman history. It's worth taking with a grain of salt, but nonetheless, very invaluable information, perhaps not where you'd want to start if you're just getting to know Steiner and Waldorf education. This is something, however, that people who've been involved in the practice for a while and want an even deeper understanding of how Steiner thought about running a school and these types of practical work. For those types of readers, this is an excellent resource, and we're so lucky to have it available in English, even if it does run to 800 pages.